Okay, so weekly update on the crypto markets, and basically to recap this crazy week and this crazy drop that we had on the Saturday, and where prices are headed, and if you need to be worried or not. So essentially, let's just zoom out for 1 minute and have a look at one thing first, which is market structure. Okay, so we've got this low that we've created here at 30k region, and then we made this higher low than this, create a higher high, and so far we are still in a region that is a higher low than this. So market structure is intact, and I would be looking at this as a potential low and a big last flush out before we get that next move higher. Fear in the market is actually pretty high at the moment, so I think these are typically very good times. But any time that you get a chance to buy Bitcoin at a 28% discount drop, okay, it's never a bad time to buy, and you usually typically at least get a bounce. But I think there's a good chance that, and I've got fairly high conviction that this is actually the low that is in. The thing that would invalidate this for me would be if we break this low at 42, would not be great. But really the line in the sand here is this low here. If we break 40k, 39k, then I would have to shift my perspective that the macro downtrend, or that the macro trend is moving down, and that wouldn't look too great, which is not something that I particularly want to happen. But so far so good. I'm actually looking at this as a really good buying opportunity and a buy the dip opportunity. So yeah, let's get into some key levels that we want to look out for. So last week we spoke about basically what do we look for that downside target, because we spoke about this weakness at 60, and we were looking at downside targets for a lot of coins, but obviously we'll stick to Bitcoin because that's the big mover in markets, and the big daddy. And we looked at this 46, 47, 48k region, okay, and it is a region where of strong support, and we've got this big puncturing wick down, but we finished and closed the daily and the weekly since that event above that. So if we could hold this level, that would be a good start. I'm expecting volatility, of course, in the next few days especially, and next coming week, and I imagine that there's opportunities if you're apt for daily volatility to swing some nice little trades. But essentially, I'd be looking at some sort of range bound pattern like this, or maybe we sort of just grind higher and we make more of a V-shaped recovery. I am more inclined to believe that this drop will be a V-shaped recovery and is closer to March 2020 than any other drop. I think this daily candle is closer to March 2020 than anything else, because we've got this massive rejection of price, back swinging up to the upside, and now we're holding above these key levels of support. If we look on the weekly and we look at some key fib levels, okay, we actually bounced off the weekly 55, so we broke all the other ones, got this massive wick down here where we also got big support at the 55 back in the 30k region. So I'll be looking at this area as a strong area of support, and that's essentially how I'd be reading it. Okay, is basically want to hold this level is really the key level. We do not want to break 40. 40 is the line in the sand for me. What else can we deduce? If we actually look at the daily RSI to tell us kind of where the momentum is headed, okay, in the short term, is that typically when we're above 50, this 50 region, okay, we do tend to be in a strong uptrend, okay. And if we look at when we broke it in sort of October over here, October 2020, we stayed above the 50 line. You can see that we made this massive parabolic move, and as soon as we basically started to get below this 50 level, okay, then basically sentiment, price is starting to turn, sort of fairly bearish. So when we broke that 50, kind of started to hang out around this region, you can see that we sort of made this little retest up here where we tried to sort of get to this 50 region up here, but we could never really hang out there, and then we basically hung out below this 50, and that was where we got this basically massive reaccumulation and sideways action down at the 30k region. As soon as we got above the 50, we move up, and we were uptrending for about a good, what, 2, 3, 4 months here. And at the minute we are closing and hanging out below this 50 level. So basically, the quicker we can get above this, that would indicate to us that maybe we can expect another momentum leg to the upside. But until then, I expect some consolidation at these prices. But I wouldn't rule out this sort of price action to basically V us out and make it up into the next leg of the cycle. I do not think this is the end of the bull market. I think, as far as I'm concerned, this is one last shakeout before a massive move to the upside. I would invalidate that opinion should we break this low, and really if we break the 40k, which is the absolute last line in the sand. Okay, and that's basically how I would be looking at all of this. And I think if we actually take a fractal of maybe what a daily how the daily candles might look from the 2020 low, and if we actually just overlay that, maybe that gives us an idea of how Bitcoin might behave if we were to V-shape out of this, where, you know, it's not too dissimilar from March 2020 low. I'm not saying that you should look at these for exact times and dates and prices or anything like that, but just to give you an idea of what that might look like if we did V out of this. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of got something like this, where if we did V out, maybe we sort of grind our way higher, reclaim 60, something like that, and then kind of push on. But remember, we're under this 50 as well, so I think that is also an option where I think we can either V out of it, or we consolidate here for maybe a week or so, hold these moving averages on the weekly, which would be pretty important, and maybe start to reclaim some of these dailies, these daily moving averages on the fibs, and kind of get back above them. But that's basically how I'm reading the market. Is macro still bullish, looks like one last flush out, invalidated below 42. If we also look at the strength of Ethereum in general, and ETH BTC, it just looks so strong. I mean, that is telling you that it just wants to push higher. But in addition to that, what does that also tell you? That the fact that ETH BTC is actually behaving this strongly is not indicative of the top of the bull market. Okay, usually what you would expect to see is a massive flush out in both BTC and alts to fall harder, but Ethereum is actually showing a lot of strength. So it's showing to me that their altcoins also have some, probably quite a bit of strength left in them. So just look at that as an indicator as well, for a leading indicator for your altcoins, and kind of like where the market direction is headed in general. So definitely something to look out for. Yeah, Ethereum's been, you know, massively super strong during this whole run. So yeah, so that's essentially what I'm looking at and how I'm looking at it. I think that there's still another leg here to go. Let's focus on, you know, BTC in general at the moment. That's what I like to focus on when we get these massive drops, because that's what's going to give you an indication of where things are headed next. BTC dominance is also towards these lows over here. Okay, back in that we've seen in May 21 and September. Typically here, BTC has actually been a pretty good hold from here. I think about it, right? If we get this, if we do move any lower, you want to hold BTC, because it obviously a lot likelier that this is actually, that BTC is going to be a stronger hold in any kind of downtrend. And if we uptrend out of here and we basically make a move to the upside, I wouldn't be surprised for BTC to be the one to basically lead us out and sort of restart the cycle as we did from October 2020. So that's basically the key info that I'll be looking out for. Another thing just to note is on the CMEs, we actually got this massive gap, and although these shouldn't be used as gospel because we've had a lot of unfilled gaps, is when we do get these big gaps as the upside or downside, they do typically get filled. So just yeah, basically just look out for this big gap that we got from 53 down just below this 50k level. So that's what I'd be looking at as well. Maybe we can come out and just feel at least sort of make an attempt and a run for 53 and see where that takes us. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Just remember that, you know, corrections in BTC and crypto in general, you know, that are like 30 to 40% is pretty standard and par for course. They don't always typically end up like this, where we get this, you know, final drawdown of about 28% in like three days or something like that. So, you know, just something to be aware of. But yeah, let's see how we move into into next week and see if we can basically get this big bounce and shift up in prices on the lower time frames. Like I said, if we can, we're trying to admit at the moment break above that 50 level, but I wouldn't be surprised if we basically move around here and consolidate for at least a day or two before we move higher. But let's see if we can reclaim 50 and basically start to get some more info that we are V-shaping our way out of this. I'm holding that 42k. That drop that we got on Saturday is the low. I have fairly high conviction in that. Crypto Fear and Greed Index is also very very low, like historic lows. You know, typically when we get this low, you know, we it's always been a really good time to buy. You know, last time we were there, where it was what, over here down in May and September, when we sort of around these lows of like 16, 18, 10. So typically very good buying opportunities where Bitcoin has gone on a run in the next few months. Okay, and I wouldn't be surprised if we look at, yeah, you know, if we just look at, that was March 2020, very, very similar fear and greed at these levels. So usually good historic buying opportunities. Best thing to do, in my opinion as well, is just buying spot in these areas is always a good idea, because that way you don't need to worry about any liquidations or leverage. Just buy and hold at these low levels, and I'll be pretty confident that, you know, BTC will probably make a turn to the upside sooner rather than later, because that's what history indicates from the past. So yeah, so hopefully you found that video fairly informative, should I say, and you got something out of it. Let me know down below where you think BTC and the crypto markets are headed. Let's see how the next few days go. Until the next one, peace out, and let's hope that the low's in.